Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of cybersecurity discussions between Ideal Integrations, Blue Bastion, and Henderson Brothers. I'm Michael Stratos from Ideal Integrations, and I have with me Corey Bussard, Luke McOmie from Blue Bastion, Dan Coast, Pete Horne from Henderson Brothers. These roundtables are designed to address critical areas of your security protocols, risk management, and financing strategies in short segments. Today's topic, encryption. Now, when I said encryption, everybody out there immediately thought, get my data encrypted malware, right? But long before encryption was used for these types of things, it was around for the opposite. It was there to secure or protect data, right? Encrypt my files, encrypted rest, encrypted flight. So with that in mind, we're going to look at encryption from the positive side of things, of encrypting your data to protect it. There's a wide variety of different levels of encryption, ways to apply encryption, at the storage level, file level, at rest, in transit. Corey, Luke, what are some of the best practices regarding encryption for an organization's cybersecurity and protection of data practice?
Yeah, so let's start off by defining what encryption can do for you, right? It can protect you from all sorts of different things, from data tampering, right? Is your data correct? It can help you prevent it from ever being messed with or tampered with. It can prevent things like sniffing attacks. So an attacker trying to sniff your data off the line. So you said about data in transit. So protecting it from those types of mechanisms. It can also help protect against spoofing attacks, right? So typically whenever you have encryption, you have some type of verification of that data, whether it's in transit or at rest. So to spoof your data or to spoof requests becomes much more complicated or harder to accomplish by an attacker. Stealing data in general, right? So it makes it harder for an attacker to just come in and maybe plug in physically, whether it be through a thumb drive or actually getting access to your network and just stealing your data in general, right? You have to have some level of verification there for your data and who it is that's trying to collect it. Injection attacks, hijacks, unauthorized access of data. That's really what encryption is there to protect you from, is those types of things. So with that, I'll hand it over to Luke to elaborate a little bit further into that answer.
No, that's dead on, Corey. You're absolutely right. A lot of the mechanisms and deployments that we've seen historically, and again, it's been around forever, to Michael's point, is really there to try to protect the data from ending up in somebody's hands that shouldn't have it, right? When we talk about physical protection, laptops, for instance, you want to make sure that you're implementing and utilizing like a full disk encryption. So if somebody steals that laptop and they pull that hard drive, they can't just plug it in and read data off of it. That's a very common form or common way to do an attack. You need to think about that with, bring your own disasters like cell phones and tablets as well. Really, when we start talking about data at rest, though, also there are ways that you can encrypt and compress, individual files. We talk about doing that with like offsite backups, where people are cataloging or performing daily backups of their environment. They want to make sure that they're properly protected against exfiltration or somebody going in and destroying them even. That's when you start seeing people do, offsite, read-only, no access, encrypted, compressed like type backups. And each of those different steps, and things that I'm pointing out there, are ways to be able to use less data or be able to protect the data that's there. To your point on data in fly or data in transit, the common example I think that people can relate to is the change that we saw with the World Wide Web when we watched everything be HTTP, and now everything's HTTPS if you want to go watch a website. That was because the implementation of SSL and TLS became a common thing for people to protect their websites and the traffic that was going back and forth between customers and their servers. So that's a common example there. Overall, the key here is to make sure that you're embracing this technology, because it's something that can absolutely protect you and your data from, being potentially leaked or destroyed or exfiltrated or whatever it is. So love encryption. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'm curious that when I first said that and immediately said encryption, of all the people that end up watching this, how many of them immediately went to ransomware? So, Dan, is encryption in compliance with similar security standards something insurance carriers evaluate when offering cyber liability insurance?
Yeah, it sure is, Michael. And as we've talked over many of these segments, the process by which underwriting and applications for cyber renewals and new business has become much more cumbersome and much more, they've really tightened up the underwriting guidelines. So encryption is something that's very important when analyzing the cyber risk. And, Corey, you mentioned something around data integrity, and just to kind of take the pure cyber hat off for a second and think more holistically about risk. Think about no matter what business you're in, whether it's healthcare, financial services, manufacturer, if you don't have that encryption and there is data that is at risk and we don't have that integrity, what's the potential implication that has from a risk perspective? How does that impact a manufacturer and the information that they need to make something? How does it impact a healthcare provider and what they're doing for a patient and patient safety, financial services, right? So you think about all the implications and where that can go from a risk perspective and the implications beyond just a cyber insurance policy, but to other insurance policies as well. So that very much interconnected from a data integrity standpoint.
So as a follow-up to that, how would coverage respond if an organization failed to uphold those encryption standards?
Sure. So there's a couple of things to think about there. Through the application process, has the company responded that they are encrypting and then in fact do not encrypt? That has a certain implication on a potential denial of coverage by an insurance carrier if they've warranted that they are doing something and pretty or not. Now, if they're doing the encryption and it's more of a human error issue or something of that nature, we certainly would have coverage under the cyber policy in a breach scenario. So you can kind of see where I'm going with that. Are we saying we're doing it, but we're actually not, versus we're doing the encryption and it's been an issue that was when there was some type of breach that occurred. So kind of two sides of that coin, so to speak.
And every application at this point is asking about, what do you encrypt? What bit level do you encrypt at? Tell me about all your other protocols. Is it in transit? Is it at rest? I mean, it's getting into more detail than even it had in the last 5 years on, tell me about your encryption, which is just the trend on, better cybersecurity requirements from an underwriting standpoint. One of the things that I think I could probably add to that on the whole coverage piece is encryption is also a regulatory issue. HIPAA, other breach and security statutes that are out there, the High Tech Act, which is another piece to HIPAA, they all require certain PHI or other sensitive information, PCI, to be encrypted. So forget about a kind of a breach scenario where the data is exfiltrated. There's also certain violations that can be just pure strict liability. You could have the Department of Health or Health and Human Services, HHS, do a HIPAA audit of your organization, find out that your encryption levels are not what they need to be in case your healthcare provider or some other organization as a covered entity under HIPAA, and now you're subject to fines. And there are ways to get cyber liability coverage for that, but still, you may not even have a true disclosure or exfiltration of that data, but now all of a sudden you have a claim because it's a regulatory issue. So that's also something carriers look at.
So, again, given the content of a lot of these conversations that we have, it's good to go back and look at, again, a positive way that encryption can be used. But at the same time, it's not the dominant conversation these days about encryption, but we certainly can and do have those conversations with clients about how they're leveraging that internally to protect themselves. So as we kind of wrap this up, Luke, Corey, any last comments before we get wrap this up?
No, I think we talked about it all.
Okay,
Just
Dan.
encrypt, right? Just encrypt.
Encrypt. We want to hear news stories
Encrypt everything.
Encryption working perfectly, as opposed to the news stories where encryption failed.
Exactly. All right. Well, on behalf of Corey, Luke, Pete, and Dan, appreciate you guys taking the time to listen, and everybody stay safe. Thanks.
Thanks.